We're live, I think. Hi everyone, hi from me, Donald Robertson, here in Halifax, Nova Scotia in Canada. And if you could just say hi and where you're from in the live chat section, if you haven't done already. Welcome to the week 3 webinar for Stoic Mindfulness and Resilience Training. I think it's week 3. I'm pretty sure it's week 3. I've been doing my other course today and it's on week 4, so I'm trying to make sure I don't get them mixed up. Welcome anyway, and let me just so the also Tim LeBon is in the live chat area. He's going to help out, and possibly our volunteers Mark, Jonathan and Chris are some of them might be there as well helping out. So the agenda for today, and by the way, just let me know if you can hear and see me okay in the comments if you haven't already. Do a little bit of general housekeeping and introductions, then I'll review the week 2 content, and then I'll preview the week 3 content. So it's fairly informal. I won't keep you too long. It should take approximately half an hour. Cool. Just looking at your comments. General housekeeping stuff. The launch video has been watched over 5,000 times in total. So it's presumably mainly people that are doing the course. We haven't really spread the link anywhere else. So a lot of people watched the video. Probably a lot of people watched the video after it went live. But that's okay because people are in different time zones and stuff. The week 2 webinar has been watched over 2,500 times, which I'd expect. It's mainly people who watch the week 1 one, but 2,500 views is quite a lot. It's pretty good. The course has, as I mentioned last time, over 5,000 participants, though that's how many people are doing it. So a lot of people doing the course. Enrollment's closed, questionnaires closed, so thanks for doing that if you took the time to do it. The Facebook group, and I know some people don't like Facebook, but that's fine. The Facebook group has over 1,600 members now, so if you are into Facebook, you're not averse to Facebook, then you might want to do it. It's optional, some people asked about that, you don't have to do it. Remember to do the quizzes and do the discussions. You'll get more out of the course if you do the quizzes and discussions. It's the interactive stuff that really matters. Don't turn it into a page turner. You won't get much out of it that way. Do the exercises, do the quizzes, do the discussions. Somebody said they couldn't understand my accent last time, so I'll try and speak more clearly. I won't bother actually, I'll just speak normally. But there's actually subtitles. You can turn on subtitles on these videos that YouTube creates automatically. So if you can't understand my accent, just turn the subtitles on. I don't know if that works in a live stream. Maybe you can let me know if it does, but it definitely works in the recording afterwards. Other things to mention are that Tim creates a PDF that you can download and read offline, and so you'll find that at the beginning of each week's content. You'll find one at the beginning of week 3. There also, I think there were some of the transcripts for the audio exercises weren't there. I thought they were, but they weren't. So I've added them. So there should be transcripts for all of the audio and stuff now, and subtitles in the videos. So all good. We haven't really had any trolling or spam that I'm aware of, but if we do, flag it up, email admin@modernstoicism.com and let us know, and we'll take care of that. One of the good things about this course is everybody seems to be really constructive. How weird is it compared to other areas of the internet where people just talk trash and stuff? But on the course, it's all constructive, all really valuable discussion. It shows what online discussion can really be like. But if you do see anyone acting weird or whatever, then just email us and let us know, and we'll put an end to it because we have zero tolerance in the course for people spoiling it for other people. And that's why it seems to work so well, because there's none of that going on. Cool. So let me just check in. You can all hear and see me okay. Awesome. Right on. Okay, so week 2, I'm not going to say a lot about it. I'll just go over it very briefly. It was about values and valued living, or whatever you want to call it, acting in accord with virtues, basically. And that was the basic concept. You have to think a little bit about what is virtue. The key thing is that it's a quality of your, psychologically, and this is very important, it's integral. The same distinction is integral weirdly, like in third wave cognitive therapy, there's this distinction between extrinsic value or external goals and intrinsic value or qualities of action, qualities of character. And this is absolutely the distinction that you find in Stoicism, so it's strange to find it resurfacing without any reference to ancient philosophy. It's kind of, like reinventing the wheel. And it's integral to a particular type of third wave cognitive therapy called acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT, but particularly associated with a thing called behavioural activation, which is a cutting-edge, evidence-based treatment for clinical depression. Okay, so it might be useful to know that this stuff is important to modern psychology. We know that it benefits people, but it's also like particularly recognizable as a part of Stoic philosophy. So some of the questions I just want to mention, because I think they're really cool, that we do in values clarification. So there's kind of two parts. Values clarification in itself is very Socratic, it's very valuable, and then there's also actually making sure that you try and live more consistently in accord with those values. So it's kind of a cognitive and behavioural element. You need, there's two wings of the dove, in order for it to take off. There's not much point clarifying your values if you don't actually try and live in accord with them. Not that much point living in accord with your values if you don't really know what they are. And those two things form a synergy, like they complement one another. So some of the values clarification questions are just like simply directly, for many people, the most powerful thing is to ask themselves, what is the most important thing to you in life? So the direct approach. What do you want your life to stand for or be about? What would you like to be remembered for? What sort of thing do you most want to spend your life doing? What sort of person do you most want to be as a parent, a friend, like a son, like a colleague at work, and so on? So I mentioned before, like the thing about a lot of these exercises is those techniques are not going to hit the right chord with everybody, and that's why we usually ask several. And this is also why the discussions are so valuable. There's not an instance of somebody getting stuck where they go, I can't understand this technique, or I can't understand this question, where it couldn't potentially be resolved by them just looking at the discussion and the feedback that other people are giving. So that's why it's so important. There's only so much that we can do as the course facilitators in terms of kind of explaining things and giving examples, and we can't respond to all 5,000 participants. But if you just delve into the discussions, your questions will be answered often by your fellow participants. It works like magic in practice, often just engaging with the other people that are doing the exercises, or just seeing how they've maybe interpreted exercises a little bit differently from you could be very, very valuable. And then we also talked about this idea of modelling, so thinking what sort of people you admire in general. So a lot of people get confused by this thing about, who do you admire? And some people go, I don't know if I admire anybody, which is what I often find in practice is people sometimes start off by saying that, and then they reflect on it a little bit, and then they dig a bit deeper and think, maybe actually there's a fictional character I admire, or maybe I admire certain aspects of somebody but not their whole character or whatever. So there's a process of working through and self-reflection. It does take patience, it takes perseverance, it takes time, and it's facilitated by looking at what other people have said and made of the exercise. That's social learning, we call it in practice. You'll get a lot of benefit out of that. And with a course this size, like I say, it's impossible for us to write a course that's going to instantly make sense to all 5,000 participants, or especially if you're dealing with tricky subjects like this, or to answer all your questions. So it's really by engaging with other people that you'll get over obstacles. And then the worksheet, we asked you to think about what's praiseworthy versus what's healthy. This is a difficult question, and it requires some reflection. It requires really asking yourself what it would mean for something to be healthy. Are there different senses? Something could be healthy for your body, it could be healthy psychologically, and maybe even there's a different sense that the Stoics have in mind in which something could be healthy. Maybe, in terms of your character as a whole, like your, the very essence of your being. Maybe something could be healthy for you in a moral sense. Like, so maybe there's different perspectives that could be explored even in terms of this concept. What does it mean for something to be praiseworthy? That's not the same as saying, what is praised by, flocks of stupid people. Like, so obviously, there might be loads of people that praise really dumb things. Like, that's not the same as saying what merits praise or what deserves to be praised. So those are slightly different kind of questions. And maybe, you're thinking about aspects of your own character, maybe also thinking about things that you admire in other people. Maybe that seems different to you. The Stoics are then challenging you to question whether they should be different. Maybe the things that you develop in your own character could be the same as the things that you are most impressed by in the character of other people. Like, maybe we need to kind of go back and forth, like we call it reflective equilibrium. Sometimes in ethics and philosophy, there's a process of exploring things from different perspectives, like in order to make our values, our worldview more consistent. So there was that exercise, the activity scheduling exercise, the daily meditation exercise, like the Benson method, just reflecting on the word arete or something like that. The self-monitoring, rating yourself in terms of living in accord with your values. The morning meditation, like the audio download. And then the questions we had were, what constitutes true human virtue? So we got really deep for like the big questions. The discussion's amazing. Like so much stuff that people have posted that's really interesting, really valuable. So I really encourage you to go and look at the discussion. And even if you only comment on one thing that someone else has said, just kind of try and make a commitment to yourself that you're going to respond to a comment on at least one other remark from another person, and that makes a huge difference overall to the group dynamic. So what constitutes true human virtue or makes a person genuinely admirable? What qualities might define someone's character as truly good or bad? And some people have said, well, I don't know if I think of people's characters as being good or bad, but do you think that some people's characters are better than others? Do you prefer, there's certain things that you think might be better or worse in any sense that you could potentially explore? Bear in mind the purpose of asking these questions is to get you to clarify your values. So with vocation, we often find that people get lost in the weeds. With any cognitive exercise, that's a risk. With certain personality types, we know that's more likely to happen. So people with OCD or with generalized anxiety disorder, sometimes have this tendency to get really lost in the weeds of these kind of questions. And so, but the way to fix that is to keep look at what other people are doing, but also keep coming back and thinking, why am I asking this question? What's the reason for posing the question? What I'm trying to do here is to get clearer about what's most important to me in life, to clarify my values. So if the question is being unpacked in a way that is leading you away from that, then kind of stop and pull yourself back, remind yourself of what the reason for asking it is. And actually that kind of noticing the way that you're asking questions and kind of evaluating whether it's helpful or unhelpful and kind of pulling yourself back from it is something that we're going to be exploring more in week 3. Look at that for a seamless segue. So let's look at the content of week 3, and for that I'll briefly check in at the comments. Cool. In the comments, post what you found most helpful about week 2 in terms of the exercises or the questions in the live chat at the moment. If you want to just take a second and do that very briefly, that would be awesome. And then, I'm sure that you'll find that beneficial just to see the live chat comments from other people going, this was cool, or I like this, or I didn't like that. It's helpful, and it motivates people to kind of squeeze more benefit out some of the questions or exercises when they see other people commenting on them. So week 3, what is it about? To further your training in Stoic mindfulness practice and dealing with problematic thoughts and feelings, week 3, it says, we'll return to and expand upon some of the concepts and techniques from week 1. It focuses on the inner world of thoughts and feelings, your cognitions throughout the day, and it aims to deepen your practice of mindfulness, it says. So it's about learning to suspend value judgments. It's about the concept of cognitive distancing, which we've touched on. We're going to kind of really get into in more detail now. training your attention to be more grounded in the here and now, and then gaining cognitive distance. And it kind of revisits and unpacks in more depth this basic distinction, the dichotomy of control, it's sometimes called, the distinction in Stoicism between what's up to us and what isn't. So the overview at the beginning of every week. So again, some people have said, "Oh, like I kind of lost track of what I was supposed to be doing and stuff." There's an overview at the beginning of every week. There's a page that just gives you a summary of what you're doing. So we try to not kind of overlabor things, be too repetitive, but we've gone over things and broken them down. We kind of go over them in the webinars and stuff. So there's a lot of reminders and stuff in this course. So the main lesson for week 3 returns to this idea of mindfulness. Like I said, looks at your relationship with your thoughts in terms of cognitive distancing and the advice from Epictetus. The daily exercise in week 3 is called the leaves and the stream exercise, which is just shamelessly lifted from acceptance and commitment therapy. And it's not really something that you'd find in ancient Stoicism, but my experience is, and my belief is, that it's obviously relevant to the concepts in Stoicism. And then the audio recording is very short. It's only 6 minutes. So I wanted to keep it really short so it was really easy for people to do. And there's a transcript underneath it, and there's some notes explaining it. It's basically what we call the evening meditation. And you'll see it's based on the golden verses of Pythagoras. Seneca talks about it. And then the self-monitoring this week is how much time. It's about time. Time's such a... I've been thinking recently about writing more stuff about time as a variable in therapy, and just the kind of like simple ways that we can relate to time and questions that we can ask. Some of the most powerful techniques in the work with our time perception. Very simple, very powerful stuff. So very simple thing here is just to track how much time you spend ruminating or worrying, or for want of a better way of putting it, indulging in unhelpful or negative trains of thought. Right. And again, this is one of these things most people will immediately kind of understand what's being asked there. Occasionally people kind of struggle to understand, what do you mean by indulging in negative thoughts? And with 5,000 people, there's always going to be some people that kind of don't understand the instructions, but you'll understand it more by looking at how other people are describing having put the exercise into practice. So it's fairly simple. We want to make it broad, so there'll be a kind of example with these kind of exercises. Often there's a clear-cut example, and then we're kind of broadening it a bit. So we'll say, look, the paradigmatic example of doing this is coping with worry. So worry is usually fairly easy to identify as a cognitive process. People typically lose track of time when they're worrying, and so it's beneficial for them to do the opposite and track time when they're worrying. And that inherently tends to lead to what we call cognitive distancing. It inherently tends to disrupt the process of worrying. And so although it seems like too easy, too simple sometimes, it's being done very tactically. It's surprising. People say, well, it's weird. Just by tracking how much time I spent worrying, I suddenly found that I was worrying less. That's often what we find. So that's kind of what we're going for here. There's a lot more nuance to this than there might seem at first. The instructions themselves are fairly simple. So some people might say, well, I don't worry. Well, so for those people, we have to broaden it a little bit. So it might be kind of ruminating about angry thoughts. It might just be dwelling negatively on the past that they do. And so there's a kind of semantic thing, So for what we find in therapy is many people will be aware that they're worrying and they know what that means. A lot of other people in my experience do what I would call worrying, but they call it something else, such as problem solving. So what a lot of people call solving problems in their head, from an outside perspective, to me, looks just like they're worrying about stuff. If it's problem solving that never actually solves any problems, That's a clue. Like, so often people think I'm just trying to solve problems in my head, but it's circular, it's frustrated or unproductive problem solving, and that sometimes gets confused with like worrying gets confused with genuine problem solving. So, we have to broaden it a little bit and say to people, just try and kind of identify what technically we would call perseverative thinking that kind of goes on a bit. And it could be 10 minutes, it could be hours that people spend indulging in or dwelling in trains of thought. You want you just to notice that happening and time it roughly. Again, you don't have to necessarily have a stopwatch there, but just kind of roughly how long you think you've spent in these unhelpful trains of thought. That's the self-monitoring. And then the questions are, the main question for week 3 is, what are the benefits of recalling what's under your control and what isn't in the face of difficult situations? And what would be the long-term consequences of doing the opposite and blurring that distinction? And again, maybe that's very directly posing one of the fundamental questions in Stoicism. What are the benefits of the dichotomy of control, of maintaining this distinction, and, what are the pros and cons of it? What are the long-term consequences of not maintaining that distinction? It's an odd thing because the dichotomy of control in a way might just seem like it's stating the obvious, like it's common sense or a truism. That's often people's first reactions. Some things are under your control and other things are not. That's just stating the obvious. That's like saying some things are big and other things are small. But it seems psychologically to be very powerful because for some reason, although it's a truism, people have this kind of tendency to blur the distinction or forget about it. That's interesting. So this is the basic concepts, cognitive distancing. I should focus on that because that's the slippery bit. So we know what we call in therapy jargon cognitive distancing is one of the most powerful evidence-based mechanisms in modern psychotherapy. And the Stoics were 2,300 years ahead of the curve because they definitely had the same concept. And actually they allude to it in a number of different ways. It's a recurring central theme of their philosophy. And the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius in particular, it's one of the major recurring themes of that book. And classicists and philosophers, in my experience, often overlook it because it's a subtle concept. And this is what we find in modern therapy. It's a concept that's a little bit difficult to explain at first, but once people get it, it'd be like clicking your fingers. Trying to teach it to a kid at first, it's kind of hard to explain how you click your fingers, but once you know how to do it, it's suddenly really easy. Cognitive distancing is just like that. It's not necessarily the easiest thing to explain at first, but once you understand what's meant, and it clicks, you go, oh yeah, it's a really simple, familiar concept. So that's the interesting thing. It's not like super accessible to people right out the gate because we don't quite have the language to articulate the concept easily. But once you get it, it's a simple concept. It's just about your relationship with your own thinking. It's a nuanced thing. Very, very powerful. It comes as a revelation to a lot of people. And it also has this very broad relevance in many, many different situations in terms of different types of problems. This one maneuver, this one technique could potentially benefit you right across the board. So it might be worth talking a little bit more about it. This is how it's summed up for me in this quote from Epictetus that says it's not things that upset us but our opinions about them. That quote, beyond a shadow of a doubt, articulates cognitive distancing. And by distancing we mean separating our opinions, thoughts, judgments, particularly our values, from the external events to which they refer. So if I say, this is awful, it's a catastrophe, like normally those thoughts are fused with external reality, so there's no separation. I think I'm just describing an external event that is inherently catastrophic in the same way that it's black or white or big or small. The catastrophic nature of it is just an an external property, just like anything else, like its color or its shape or something. It is a catastrophe. I'm describing what I see. And in cognitive, when we gain cognitive distancing, or when we separate or distance our thoughts from reality, I realize, no, the catastrophicness of it is something I'm projecting onto the event. There is no catastrophe in nature. There's just a shuffling around of atoms and stuff. These values don't exist outside my mind. There's nothing good or bad, but thinking makes it so. I choose to view it as catastrophic, which is fair enough. But nature doesn't know it's a catastrophe. Nature doesn't know the coronavirus is a catastrophe. As far as nature's concerned, it's just something that it does. It's a process. We might view it as a terrible catastrophic thing. In some situations, someone else might happen to view it differently, or as less severe. It's all kind of subject to our perspective. 100 years from now, people looking back on it might view it very differently, and some people view these natural disasters and epidemics and so on very differently from other people. So this is the other point the Stoics will make, is does everybody view it in the same way? And if other people view it differently, then that reminds us that what we see in it is a reflection of our own thoughts and judgments. And so the way that Beck explained that to clients at the beginning of cognitive therapy typically was to say, imagine you're looking at the world through rose-tinted glasses and everything seems rosy and pink to you, and then someone else comes along and they're wearing blue, sad glasses, and you realize that the world looks different to them, and you could swap the glasses, or you could take your glasses off and look at them rather than looking through them. So realizing that the pinkness resides in the lenses rather than residing in external reality is distancing or separating the color, in this case, from external events. But we're really interested in separating value judgments from external events, because that dilutes, without eliminating, the emotional impact that they have. So it allows us to continue making value judgments without being enslaved by them or overwhelmed by them, which is really, this kind of magic that the Stoics were going for. So there's a number of ways that, and the Stoics, Epictetus anyway, alludes to another means of gaining cognitive distance. There are a whole bunch of different ways that you can do this. Epictetus alludes to another one, interestingly. And another famous quote in the Enchiridion, he says, tell yourself when you're experiencing distress or a troubling impression, he says, you're just an impression and not at all the thing that you claim to represent. In Greek, it's kind of neater than that. It's a bit hard to translate. But anyway, in the Greek, it's a little bit clearer, actually, what he means, the play on words that he's making. You're just an impression and not at all the thing that you claim to represent. So he's separating the representation from the thing that it claims to represent, separating the thought from the thing that it refers to. And there's a couple of interesting things about the way that he phrases it. He tells his students to talk to the impression or the thought. I call that apostrophizing. So that means kind of talking to something, an abstract concept or an idea. So you can talk to your thoughts. A way that we might do this in therapy today, which is a little bit different, but maybe easy, a little bit more relatable actually, is if I think this is a catastrophe, these people are all idiots. That might be relevant. In a lot of situations today, in Canada, there's a thing trending all over the news about one of the parks opening up and it being packed with people and stuff. And so people are all kind of irate about it on Twitter or whatever. So I might be looking at stuff that's going on around me now on either side of the debate and thinking, this is a catastrophe. These people are all idiots. If I defuse those thoughts and gain distance, though, I might say, I notice right now that Donald is telling himself this is a catastrophe, and he's telling himself that these guys are idiots. So I take a step back and I comment on my thoughts, I might choose to even frame it in the third person. So rather than saying, I'm having these thoughts, I might say, oh, I noticed that Donald is having those thoughts. He's telling himself this is a catastrophe. Like, Donald's thinking this is a catastrophe. And that allows me to kind of just pause and prise away the thought from external reality rather than blending or fusing the two things together. That allows me to gain mental, cognitive flexibility, and it contributes to emotional resilience, which is what the course is about. Then we have some more examples from Epictetus, some quotes from Epictetus. We have the leaves in the stream exercise. The leaves in the stream exercise is a great exercise, and there's one limitation, and it's not something that people that use it typically mention. And like a lot of these exercises, I think your relationship with the exercise will evolve. So one of the odd things about training courses is you give people an exercise, and usually some people will kind of really respond with their initial feeling about the exercise. And in many cases, the best advice would be just do it a few more times, because you'll probably figure this out. Like, that's a bit of a lazy response from a facilitator in a way, but it's often the case that people just need to kind of stick with it a little bit longer, and then they'll gradually figure it out. It's kind of because you're developing a skill and a habit. It would be like if somebody went to the gym for the first time and they were like, oh, like I'm doing press-ups or whatever, and it's really hard, and why is it so difficult? And what you want to say is, well, just do it a bit longer though. Maybe do it every 3 or 4 times a week for a few weeks, and then tell me how you're getting on with it. So leaves in the stream, there may be problems you encounter at first, but many of them, in my experience, will tend to be resolved just with perseverance. And also, again, looking at how other people are getting on with the exercise. So the key thing is, keep thinking it through, keep experimenting, keep working on it, listen to what other people are saying. I'm confident you'll figure it out. Now, the limitation that I know, which is not one that people usually mention, how can I put this? What you're really going for, so you're visualizing when a thought pops into your mind. So I might be sitting here thinking, oh my God, nobody likes me, everybody hates me, I think I'll go and eat worms, if like kind of depressive thought. So when we're doing leaves in the stream, we just visualize a stream. And listen, it could be anything at all. It's a completely arbitrary image, right? A stream is just convenient. And some people imagine a load of people marching down the street carrying banners or whatever. It could be anything. As long as it's passing by relatively slowly and it's not an avoidant thing, you're trying to get rid of the thoughts as quickly as possible. So nobody likes me, everybody hates me, I think I'll go and eat worms. So imagine that I'm taking that thought and writing it on a piece of paper and then putting it on a leaf that's floating gently down the stream. So that allows me to pause, change my relationship with the thought, picture it from a distance, and then just patiently, allow it to drift off over into the distance, off into the horizon, down the stream. So I'm not avoiding the thought, but I'm kind of letting go of it and allowing it to fade from my mind. And the visual image of the leaves in the stream is just a kind of metaphor that allows me to do that. With practice, what you're going for is so that you don't have to even picture this at all. Because there's a downside to doing that. It's a prop, it's a tool, it's a gimmick. So eventually you want to not have to picture it at all. And you're really just going for the feeling. It's not exactly a feeling, it's a relationship with your thoughts. You're going for this knack, this attitude. And all this visual rigmarole is really just a kind of metaphor. It's a way to help you understand how to get this mindset, this attitude towards automatic thoughts that pop into your head, to gain distance and let go of them, right? You want to get rid of all the apparatus of visualizing a stream and bits of paper and stuff like that. To begin with though, you do that just to help yourself learn the attitude, learn the reaction, the response that you're looking to cultivate, and then eventually you can dispense with the actual visual imagery, if that makes sense. And you're going to record how much time you spend ruminating about things. I think previously tally, was it, in week 1? That's a very powerful technique. This is kind of a little bit like that. So for example, I mentioned that when people worry, they'll lose track of time. if you are counting the minutes, or you're kind of noticing how much time you spend, that if you do it in the right way, that forces you to gain cognitive distance. Because think of it like this: when you worry or ruminate, it's like you're telling yourself, it's like a form of evil, negative, toxic self-hypnosis. Worry is like toxic self-hypnosis. It's like you're telling yourself a story and getting lost in the story. And it's a story about how awful something is, and how hopeless your situation is, and how incapable of dealing with it you are. So, oh my God, like, you're getting trapped inside this kind of prison you're creating in your own thoughts. And so in distancing, we're kind of taking a step out of that. It's like if you're sitting around the campfire and someone tells you a scary story, and you get so lost in the story, you're actually kind of, you can see and hear and smell and feel the things that they're describing, and the hairs begin to stand up in the back of your neck, and you start to shiver and turn pale with the story that they're telling you. But someone else might be listening to the story and just thinking, God, this guy's voice is really annoying. So they're hearing the same words that you're hearing, but they're not fused with the story at all. Like they're having a problem getting into it because they find the guy's accent's too funny, or there's something distracting about it. So both of these people are listening to the same words, the same story being told, but one of them's immersed in it, and their body is changing, their heart rate's racing, the hairs are standing up in the back of their head. The other guy can't get into it that much. He's not reacting emotionally or physically, even though he's listening to exactly the same story being told. And that's because he's not fused with it. He's gained cognitive distance. So imagine that the story is worry, or like ruminating about some perceived injustice or something that's making you angry. So obviously, if it's a toxic, it's an unhelpful, an unhealthy train of thought, like you might want to gain cognitive distance from it, not be hypnotized by it, not to feel it, in your bones. You might want to be able to go, okay, I'm noticing those thoughts, but I'm not really getting immersed in them in the same way. And the exercise that we talk about, which again is incredibly simple but very powerful. I'll tell you the story of how it was discovered. In the 1980s, the leading researcher on worry as a cognitive process, a guy called Tom Borkovic, did a research study with a bunch of college students in the US, testing a technique called the stimulus control method, or worry postponement, we sometimes call it. Stimulus control method is kind of more technical behavioral psychology term for it. But the technique's dead simple, right? Borkovic said to these students, I want you just to notice when you're worrying about stuff. And when you begin worrying, I want you just to write down, like in 2 or 3 words, or what you're worrying about. So worry's a whole complicated story about, oh my God, how am I going to pay the bills? Oh my God, what if I get sick from coronavirus and die or something? So you might just write down on a bit of paper, worrying about coronavirus, worrying about paying bills or whatever. And then fold it up and put it in your pocket, and you say, it's not the right time to think about that just now. I'm going to come back to it later. So we call it postponement, right? And it's fundamentally different from avoidance. Avoidance would be saying, oh, I really don't like this. I must stop thinking about it. I've just got to get it out of my mind altogether. Postponement is, I'm going to think about this, but at a time of my choosing. So I'm in control of when I think about it. I'm not going to allow the thoughts popping into my mind. We all have these automatic thoughts that just come in spontaneously, or it might be triggered by something that comes on the news, or something that somebody says to us. It might be triggered by something external. But we can choose whether we continue thinking about it or not, which is what Epictetus is telling his students. So at your leisure, he says, come back and think about these things. And that's very important, because often when automatic thoughts hijack our thinking, where our brain goes into a different mode of functioning, whereby a whole bunch of things happen that distort our ability to think clearly. Haven't you noticed that when you're upset or when you're really angry, it's like you become an inferior version of yourself, right? So when you're all chilled and you're sitting calmly, it's easy to think how you would cope sensibly and very wisely with your kids being rude to you or something going wrong or whatever. You're suddenly much wiser you know. But then in the actual situation, you kind of, you know, we often let ourselves down. We think, why did I handle that so badly? And it's because your brain goes into a different mode of functioning. The way you allocate attention changes, like the way that you reason changes, a whole bunch of things change. You're in a different mode of functioning, like fundamentally. And so you might think, it might be better for me to wait until I've re-emerged from that mode of functioning and I'm in more of a confident, calm, rational mode of functioning, and then I'll pick up this worry. So Borkovic said, when you notice yourself beginning to worry, just jot down what it's about in your pocket. I'll come back to it later. And ideally you'd set aside a specific worry time, like 7 o'clock every night. You could put on a little worry hat, sit in a little worry chair, and you voluntarily engage in those thoughts. I don't think they did this in the original study, but now what we tend to say, just from experience of doing this, is that a lot of people say the first thing that hits them when they sit down in their prescribed worry time is they take out the list of things that they meant to worry about. Suddenly it doesn't seem like it's worth it. So people will often say, I took out a bit of paper and it said worrying about dying of coronavirus. And I thought, well, what's the point in worrying about that? It doesn't seem like it was worth the effort anymore. It's not worth it, as they say in EastEnders. It just doesn't seem like it was worth it anymore. Or, you know, I think about it for like 1 minute or whatever, and then it's not worth going round and round in circles about it. So the first question to ask yourself is, does it still seem worthwhile dwelling on this? And if so, you might think, well, it's a genuine problem that I could do something about. You might say, well, I'm going to think it through, but I'll do it calmly, rationally, methodically, and with greater mindfulness and cognitive detachment. So in my worry time, I will think about it, but I'll do it more calmly and more patiently, and I'll try and actually solve the problem. But if it seems like it's just pointless worrying and it's circular, then maybe it's not even worth returning to it at all. But I'll sit down and just ask myself that and make a decision about it. So that's the worry postponement technique. It's a very powerful technique. And some people think it seems odd to set aside thoughts, but I would put it to you that it's the most natural thing in the world. And if you can't do it, then there's something unnatural going on. Because the easiest example would be every night when you're trying to get to sleep, you might have an automatic thought that pops in your mind about something that could be alarming or that could cause you to worry or ruminate. But most people will say to themselves, I'm trying to get to sleep. I'll think about this in the morning, the right time to think about it just now. Or you might be in the middle of any kind of activity. You might be about to give a wedding speech, or you might be looking after a child or something, and a thought pops into your mind, and you might have to say, I'll need to come back to this later. So postponing thinking about thoughts is the most natural thing in the world. I just want to say that in that initial study, Borkovic's team found that episodes of worry reduced by roughly 50% in terms, on average, in terms of frequency, intensity, and duration of the worry episodes. So even this one really, really simple technique had quite a powerful effect on alleviating worry. And so it's used quite a lot now in cognitive behavioural therapy. And the reason we're mentioning it is because Epictetus several times tells his students to do pretty much the same thing, or to do something very similar. He says when you notice an automatic thought, or in Stoic jargon, when you notice a propatheia, when you notice the first movement of a passion, an irrational, excessive, disturbing emotional desire, rather than dwelling on it, Epictetus says, set it aside and then come back to it later at your leisure when you're more able to deal with it rationally. And then the audio recording for this week is at the end of the day, just reviewing, like I mentioned earlier, in the golden verses of Pythagoras. What did I do badly? What did I do well? What did I omit to do that could be done differently next time? And that, ladies and gentlemen, is all the stuff for week 3. So hopefully you found that discussion helpful. I've just noticed the sun's in my eyes. It's not really bothering me too much, but maybe you can see it on the camera. Anyway, I hope that you found that helpful. And let us know on Facebook or in the discussion area if you have any other comments or questions. And I hope you enjoy week 3. and look forward to seeing you guys on the course. So